on June 16th, 2021. This meeting will be conducted via remote participation. No in-person attendance by members of the public will be permitted. People who wish to watch or participate in the meeting may do so by finding the meeting at www.southboroughtown.com/remote meetings. This is a joint meeting, so we want to welcome the SHOPSI and the Board of Selectmen, and also our town administrator and town council. Lisa, did you want to go next? Go ahead.
Actually, I'm just going to call the Board of Selectmen meeting to order at 7:03. All selectmen are present.
Great. Dorianne?
There's nobody else here from my board, so I don't think I need to call the meeting to order right now, right?
There is John Wood in the attendees list.
Oh, Marty.
And
Sorry, Marty.
Marty's
I'm counting
there.
you as a Board of Selectmen. Okay, well, I'll call the meeting of SHOPSI to order at 7:03 p.m.
Okay. Again, thank you for joining us for the beginning part of our planning board meeting tonight. The first agenda item is a discussion item, and it's the joint meeting with the boards, and it has to do with three items: the trees, tree warden, tree board, scenic roads. So I'm not sure if actually I'd be surprised if we did come to an agreement, but the purpose of this tonight is to get the discussion started. Now that the tree warden has resigned, it's an opportunity for us to decide how the public trees in the town of Southborough will be managed. And that includes cutting them down, trimming them, and planting new ones. So we, Karina, did you, these talking points, did those just go to me, or?
They just went to the planning board members.
Okay, so what we have here is, this discussion is to help determine how to move forward with the tree concerns and the tree management in the town. And so we want to look at who should manage the trees and how the public trees would be managed. And I think at our last meeting, we talked about the ways other different towns do it. Some of them have a tree warden, like we have or had, and that tree warden either answers to the select board or DPW or someone else. Other towns have a tree board. Some of them are just advisory; they have no authority, and some of them do have some authorities and require certain credentials to be on the tree board. Probably the number one credential would be a certified arborist. And then who would the tree board answer to? What powers would they have, if any? And then we also reached out to the chair of the Public Works Planning Board for thoughts on their participation in the tree management program. So not sure how much we all know about how trees are managed in similar towns. I guess some towns do nothing and then just react to the danger of the trees. But as a Tree City town, we are, one of the requirements is to either have a tree warden or a tree board or some type of a government entity that manages the tree program. So we've looked at some of the other towns, and there may be some good ways to do this, to move forward. And maybe establish a program where we don't have to reinvent the wheel. So I guess I'll put it out there. We could just hire another tree warden and continue as we have.
Dawn, I just want to point out to the select board, I emailed you just now the talking points, the document, in case you didn't see your email.
Hey, Colleen, Tom Bizicle is in the, he's a public attendee. Could somebody elevate him to panelist? Thank you.
So we could continue as we had with a tree warden, but I don't think that the recently retired or tree warden that we had was a certified arborist. I think most towns' tree wardens do have a degree in arbor. We could go in that direction. We could look at a tree board where it's not all dumped onto one person, which would be the tree warden, and you'd have more than one set of eyes on a tree program or a series of trees or a tree. We could also use a consultant or a blend of these things that we think would best suit the program and the people of the town. So I guess I'll open it up. I'm interested in what other people think and what other programs work. So it might be a little bit too early tonight to make a decision, but at least we'll set this in motion, and hopefully we can all come up with a really good way to manage the trees in the town of Southborough. So anyone want to tune in?
Jesse, could you clarify, we don't see Tom Bizicle in the attendees, and Eileen, Colleen, you elevated Tim Litt, and he's a public participant. Just to clarify.
So who,
Tom
Who's
Bizicle
Tom?
just emailed me that
Yeah, he's not in yet, Jesse.
he's in attendance. Sorry, he's in attendance at the meeting as a public attendee. Could the moderator please elevate him to a panelist?
He's not in the
But-
list, Jesse.
unless he's using another name on a computer?
I don't know. He just emailed me that, so.
If he could raise his hand when he shows up, then we can elevate him.
Yeah, there you go.
And you can put Tim Litt, I think, back down into the attendees. Sorry about the confusion.
So since the resignation of the tree warden, does anybody know if anything's been done in that direction to either replace him or look into another way to have the trees managed?
So Don, I'll speak to that. It hasn't been on an agenda yet. I have it scheduled to be on agenda. I know we were meeting tonight to have some general discussions. Could we ask council to, I'm just curious as far as statute and what we can and can't do and whether it's just a matter of a bylaw. Jay, can you kind of give us a little bit of process?
You meaning what the outer extent of what you can do, or what you do in the situation where you don't currently have a tree warden?
I guess kind of both. I mean, currently, what does statute require of us? And looking at it, going about a change, what would the proper process be to go down that path?
Well, so in terms of looking forward, if you wanted to do something in excess of what Chapter 87 provides for a tree warden, then you could certainly do a bylaw. You're allowed to provide more regulation in Chapter 87 if you want, but and that's always possible by a bylaw. You know, how much you want to regulate these things is up to you. I will state just anecdotally that I don't have too many towns that go much beyond what is provided through either the scenic road statute or the shade tree statutes. That's not to say that they all treat it the same. Some towns have a much more robust process for monitoring these things in other towns, where, as Don said, some towns are more reactive than proactive on it. But basically, most towns just operate with the tree warden model.
Okay, thank you. I appreciate that. So again, our board hasn't discussed it, Don. It hasn't been on an agenda yet. It's on the planning to be on for the 15th, but if we'll open it up to the Board of Selectmen, if anyone has any comments or questions or thoughts on this. We'll start with Ms. Malinowski.
Thank you. I mean, I think one of my concerns about finding somebody to be a tree warden is historically we've had it be a stipend position through the SAP for a current employee. So one of my questions would be, how would we fill that role? And would it still be a stipend position under the selectmen, or would it be, is that even going to be an option, or would it have to be more of a consultant that you would hire as your tree warden as needed? And then I know this is probably getting a little bit ahead, but looking at the proposed bylaw and what would be required of this person, I have some concerns on kind of the amount of work that would be required to fulfill the proposed bylaw.
Okay. Mr. Healy.
Yeah, thanks, Lisa. I guess my reaction at this point is I don't know what I don't know. And Chelsea's touched on it a little bit in terms of cost. You know, one of the things Karen emphasized in touching base about the resignation of the tree warden is that we've been lucky from a cost standpoint. He didn't have the qualifications that are laid out in the statute or regs. Yeah, reasonable qualifications, but I'm not sure if we have information from other towns about what the cost is of having somebody with those sort of qualifications, whether in a consultant standpoint or a part-time or full-time employee. I guess the sort of items that I would put in the mix, for the most part, I don't care looking at it. I don't care if the ultimate responsibility is, you know, with this board, with the planning board, with the public works board, with a newly created tree board, you know, as long as there is responsiveness. I mean, one of the things that took me aback with the research that was done about the town meeting votes that were taken in the 1970s is that, you know, the town's bylaws, regs, whatever in this area are a bit of a muddle. And I don't know, Don, you've got, I think, more institutional knowledge than any of us. But I am assuming that at some point in maybe the 70s or the 80s, the planning board functioned looking at all of the town, all of the roads in town as scenic roads, and then somehow either that lapsed or the votes that were taken in the 70s were either implicitly or explicitly, you know, undone. But it's really, it is unclear to me right now what the lines of authorities are, what the definitions that cover various roads are. And obviously anything that's done has to clear that up. But in terms of where the authority lies, that doesn't matter as much to me as making sure we have expertise, responsiveness, safety concerns addressed, and how much is this going to cost the town? So I guess those are my initial thoughts.
Thank you. Mr. Stivers.
Thanks. As folks know, I've been circling around this for a while, the last year or so here, and I agree with Marty. I'm less consumed by where the responsibility lies versus actually making sure that we cover what we need to have done here. And I actually think that the state statutes give us enough leverage to do the right thing here, but for whatever reason, that hasn't been working recently. And so I think we do need something that provides more accountability in terms of responsibility, clarity of responsibilities, and mechanisms to allow whoever's responsible to do what needs to be done. I think, at least my view, is that the scenic road statutes give clear authority to the planning board to do what could be done, should be done as for scenic roads. And if all town roads are scenic roads, almost all town roads, then that could be a mechanism to allow the planning board to actually take primary responsibility for this, which certainly has some budget implications. I think that, if I see sort of the tree bylaw as a sort of a fail-safe option to plug the holes that apparently have existed in terms of the way we've dealt with this historically. I'm not sure in a perfect world we would need that, but apparently we do need something like that given our experience with this. I think from a tree warden standpoint, it's my understanding that when we passed 10,000 population, which we recently did, the requirements for tree warden credentials increased. And it seems to me that we ought to be able to find a consultant kind of relationship out there to fill that role, because it's not that we have, 500 new trees each year that we need to evaluate and check on and assess, et cetera. But once we sort of get the inventory squared away, then I think that it becomes a matter of management from whatever group is responsible to deal with trimming and removal and so on and so forth. So, I mean, I think there are a number of ways that it can be solved, as people are suggesting. But to me, the focus is on finding a structure that actually does protect the trees better than we've been doing, and clarifying who's responsible for what. And maybe we look at a couple of models, maybe you look at other towns and find examples that we can point to and say, here's what we need to do, and move forward. But clearly something needs to be done. So I'm willing to pay a little more for an arborist to actually do the right thing here. That's it for me now. Thanks.
Thank you, Sam. Andrew?
Thanks. I guess I first have just my comments are more in the nature of questions, maybe to Don. Do you, in your research, have you uncovered a town which has a bylaw that you think should serve as like a model for Southborough? And if so, have you reached out to anyone at that town to find out what their experience is like? Or maybe this is a question that more goes towards someone else, but.
Yeah, I would defer to Mrs. Luttrell, but you're talking about a bylaw, and I know Marty brought up the scenic road piece. I think Sam, you did too, which is kind of, it's definitely directly related because it has to do with the trees. But I think the purpose of tonight's agenda item and everything that's being said is definitely what we have to look into or have a better understanding. But the focus tonight is to have us as a town decide how we're going to manage the public trees. And going back to your specific question, Andrew, though you asked about a bylaw, I have to look at my notes to see if I looked at Westboro. But if you go on the Westboro town website, they have a link they have a department, I think it's called Forestry and Trees, or it's Forestry and something. And that, the way they manage their trees, and as you probably know, they are a tree city. The way they have it managed looks like it's a pretty good way that we should look into and possibly, copy it, make some adjustments. But in my limited research, and that's why earlier tonight I said, I don't think we're going to resolve this tonight, but at least we'll get it rolling. I liked Westboro's forestry webpage, and and the way they manage their public trees. I hope that's the extent, I think, to which I can answer your question, Andrew. And then, Mrs. Luttrell, if you want to, you've done a lot more on this than I have, but I think your work was more on a bylaw or a code, a section of the code. So did you want to speak, Mimi? I don't, were you all set there, Andrew, for now?
I did have a couple other comments / questions, but I don't know if you wanted to.
Yeah, let's see if Mrs. Luttrell can answer your question or speak to what you brought up first, then we'll come back to you, if that's okay. Go ahead, Mimi.
Sure. Yes, Andrew, I looked at a lot of other towns and I did a draft bylaw that's based on Provincetown, Grafton, and Cambridge, kind of pulled different pieces together from all three. Did I call the towns to ask? I did not, but maybe I'll put that on my list of things to do.
And do you know if those municipalities have a tree board or a tree warden?
Tree warden, I believe.
Okay.
Some of them might have had both.
So I will take a look at that. I think the one kind of big picture kind of comment that I might offer here is maybe a two-stage process where the first question is what to do in the next kind of like 6 months. I think for the bylaw, I mean, that, Don, to your question about how should the trees in the town be managed, ultimately, it's something that requires some input from town meeting. And I think that, I mean, that's what I see this bylaw as aimed at addressing. I've always liked the idea of regularizing the process of having a fall special town meeting that would be more focused on land use, zoning, environmental issues, kind of like how we had last year. I think that format allows for, attention to be really focused on, it gives those issues the time that it deserves already. The annual town meeting this year is pretty busy. So as kind of one thing which was really a discovery for me is the fact that the 1978 conservation vote that nearly every road in the town is a designated scenic road unless it was created after 1978. So I think that really forces our hand here that if I've got this right, any tree which is within I don't know the distance from the road, but close to the edge of the road on a scenic road, that it has to go to the planning board, right? There has to be a notice, has to go to the planning board before it can be cut down. That's the current state of the law. I don't see how everyone can get on board with a comprehensive solution. I think it would be very ambitious to try to solve this by May 4. And as an interim stopgap measure, I think that probably the Board of Selectmen, the select board, needs to appoint a tree warden it's going to cost more money, probably an outside person to manage this process. But I guess that would, under this shade tree statute, does the tree warden also have a role jointly with the planning board in managing? Okay, so you do need to do that. So I'm done. Thanks.
Mr. Healy?
Yeah, and I don't know who did the research back to 1978, but
Paul Bunyan.
But again, Don, it goes to it is odd to me that not that town meeting took action in 1978, but that it doesn't appear that the town has acted consistent with that vote. Now, I don't know if the town did, and what I mean is, I don't think the town has acted. I think it surprised most people. It certainly surprised me that in 1978 a vote was taken designated anything without a number in it or whatever the language was as a scenic road. And I don't, here's the interesting thing. And Jay, maybe you can weigh in on this. And that's why earlier I said, there may have been an implicit or an explicit, at least muddying of that 1978 vote. For instance, if you say in 1978 that all roads without a number in them are scenic roads, and then in 1995, and I'm not saying that happened, but I haven't done the research from 1978 to 2022. If in 1995 you say you pass a bylaw or you take a town meeting vote that say that says Parkerville, Flag and Deerfoot are scenic roads in Southborough, there's a statutory construction argument that you have overruled that 1978 vote. And so I don't know. So something happened, it seems to me, that, or maybe it was just, it sort of withered away, but something happened that caused the town to not honor that 1978 vote. And it's not unclear to me. It's a mystery. And so I'm wondering if it, again, just withered away, or if there was some intervening action by town meeting that affects that vote. And all that is a prelude to say, going back to a point I made earlier, there needs to be clarity about this. And I think maybe your bylaws, agree or disagree with the substance. Something like that needs to be done, so there's clarity about what is and isn't a scenic road, who does and doesn't have, primary jurisdiction and responsibility here. But then looping back to your original point, Don, I think Andrew's response about how to get through this, from a short term and look to a long term is I'm comfortable with that, to try to come up with a short term solution that gets us maybe to a fall town meeting. And then consider then, both from a cost standpoint and otherwise, how we deal with it in a longer term.
One thing you said, Marty, I noticed that Jay sat up relative to the 1978 vote. Whatever was designated as a scenic road, as a public way that existed in 1978, and the vote carried, designated those roads as of that date as scenic roads. Since then, our research has indicated that there's been at least, and this is unbelievable, 68 new roads in town since 1978 and today. And those are public ways. There's a number of private ways where this doesn't apply. Going back to the scenic road thing, the scenic road piece is the where part of this. Where are the trees that are to be managed? Again, the purpose of tonight's meeting is the how are we going to manage the public trees, and who is going to manage them. And we've heard, would it be the selectmen? Would it be the planning board? Would it be, a tree board? So we have to keep the scenic road piece in mind, but that's the where part. The trees on an existing scenic road are handled one way in this town, and those 68 roads that have trees can be managed a different way, a lower level of management. And that's why the scenic road bylaw draft is before us, so that we can bring those 68 roads up to the level of management that we feel is appropriate. And again, passing the scenic road, we're drifting off of this into the scenic road part, but passing that it just would increase the number of roads that fall under that section of the Massachusetts law. The purpose of tonight's meeting agenda item is how are we going to do it? And it seems I think we've made huge progress because everybody seems to be wanting to develop some type of a program that results in an improved management, an improved program. So that to me is huge. And now we just have to, I guess, do some more homework, find some examples where it works. And as Andrew brought up, dig into and call these other towns, take it to that next level of how much does this great program cost you? And then once we get all those little pieces, we can make an informed decision. If everyone on the board of selectmen of the select board has talked at least once, I'd like to open it up to the members on the planning board.
Don, do
start
you
with-
mind? I haven't actually spoke yet.
I
Do you
don't
mind
mind.
if? Okay,
I don't
thank you.
mind.
No, I just wanted to add a couple of my thoughts as well. Some of the things I completely agree that we need to come up with the process on how to do this to provide the clarity that's needed. I think there's a lot of confusion. There's been a lot of confusion in the past. I know. I think a little bit of clarity was provided by town council as far as what can be done on specific roads. I think cost is certainly an issue, and I think we need to consider responsiveness as well as we move forward, is making sure that things are done in a timely manner as well, and that through this process, planning board doesn't get inundated, and that people understand, potentially, I'm not clear on what the right of way is. I don't know what that number is.
It varies. It varies. When the old streets were laid out, they had 1 rod, 2 rod, 3 rod roads, and a rod is around, I think, 16 feet. So, and Karen, there are plans at the DPW, we've seen them, of these old existing roads that have what they call varying or variable width roadways. And that's pretty much because when some of these roads were laid out, it was the result of the location of the stone walls for the fields, or where the horses could traverse, not necessarily in a straight line, and it caused all these, country roads. So it's a variable width public way. And as we know, the pavement on some streets, the pavement is the limit of the public way. It's pretty rare. Almost all the roads in town, the pavement is significantly less. So you might have 16 feet of pavement with 5 feet on one side and 4 feet on the other side, or 10 feet before you get to the stone wall or the edge of the public way. It varies. Did I help you with that at all?
You did. So that kind of leads me to a point of also through this process, I think there's an educational opportunity as we consider how we want to move forward, and how this affects a homeowner as well, that where is the right of way? So I have trees on the edge of my property by the road. Do I need to come forward to planning board as well? Is this a tree warden? So I think we need to consider all these things as we try to figure out a process. I mean, the last thing I want is planning board inundated with getting a ton of tree hearings all the time. But I think through education, we can certainly address that. I as well am not as concerned about who the tree warden or whomever answers to. I agree with Marty on that. I think it's getting done what needs to be done that's best for the taxpayers and for the town. So I'm certainly would be looking to do some type of process. And I agree, we have homework here. Mimi, thank you for saying what the towns were. I'll certainly go and research them as well. And, hopefully we can work together and come forth with a process that works for everybody. That's
Thank
it for me. Thank you.
Mrs. Luttrell.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions. One, there's an $85,000 line item in the DPW budget, which is for tree experts. Does anyone know what that is for? So there may be some funds there. I'm hoping we don't take down $85,000 worth of trees every year. The other thing is that if we push this bylaw till the fall, I would hope we have a moratorium on cutting down public shade trees until the fall town meeting. Because the trees in the public right of way are public trees, they're a public asset, and they belong to all of us and not just the DPW. That's all.
Mrs. Houlihan?
Thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to hear everyone's thoughts on this. So Lisa, thanks for your thoughts around being inundated with public tree hearings. However, I must say I echo Mimi's concern around, I'd rather be inundated with public tree hearings than have letters coming in from our community that trees are being taken down for no apparent reason. So I think we're a little concerned that despite a law that says we can't be taking down trees greater than a certain size caliber, that they're coming down. And so we definitely need a moratorium. So we would, maybe ask the select board if this is something that we would want to delay to beyond May into the next meeting that goes forward. I do think it's just important to develop the structure and to make sure that we're all aligned. I do think accountability is very important, and it's apparent that there has been a law and there hasn't necessarily been accountability or attention to the law that's in place. So Sam made the mention that structure, whether it reports to any authority, I think it still needs to be within the construct of the select board. The DPW has all the equipment, they have all the appropriate things that need to be done to be able to service that. And I think it would be way too complicated for us to have some other authority involved. So I would still support that a select board have ownership of a tree warden, but I again would say that a certified arborist would be the right way to go. Chelsea, you raised the point about money and the cost of the town, and it will cost the town. I think that we are obligated by being a very scenic area, conservation town, a town that's enacted all of these scenic roads, to be able to support that. And I think that if we have the right infrastructure in place and we designate whether it's a consultant in the next 6 months to get us through until we have a town meeting, that we designate some of that potential, the 85,000 that Mimi just made us all aware of. I wasn't aware that existed. To be able to support some of the consultant work, and that could also help us on a process as well. And I would just say that, in my opinion, we need a tree warden, a certified arborist. I would like to be able to fund a consultant in the interim that we'd put a moratorium on until we have a decision that we're all in agreement with. And that, I think, Don, your earlier point, looks like we're all in alignment. I think we all want to try to preserve what we can of this beautiful town and our trees and our shade trees. So it's wonderful to hear that everyone's working together to make sure that we make the right decisions moving forward. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. Thank you. Mr. Stein?
I don't have a lot to add. I think that Mimi and Marnie have it right. I don't disagree with anything I've heard from that end of the table. My concern is that, and I've said this multiple times when this agenda item has been up in the past, that we've had a process in writing all along that just hasn't been followed in effect, in reality. And it's on the basis that in a given situation, there's like a safety issue. So I'm not sure how this is going to get addressed, but for now, I'll just leave it at that I'm in support of the initiatives by Mimi. Thank you.
Mr. Mills?
Yeah, thanks, Don. Like Jesse said, not much new to add. Encouraged that everyone seems to be on the same page that, we can do better than what we have in the past. And looking forward to making that happen because for those of you who've been to some planning board meetings, we have gotten bombarded lately with, why did this tree come down? Who approved that? It was healthy, and it's too late. So I do agree with what was said too about the trees are an asset of the town. I think we have a responsibility to protect them at the same time. So I don't want to take away again from what Mimi and Marnie were saying. I think they had great points there, and I think we can take that forward would be great. Thank you.
I guess at this point, it might be appropriate to, since we've been talking about trees, to call on Mr. Wood.
I got nothing. Thank you.
Okay, John. Anyone else? Anyone else want to say anything? Otherwise, it looks like we'll move this item along. Continue to do more research on it, especially on the money end of it. But and I would suggest a starting point would be to look at the Westboro town link for the forestry, the way they manage it, and get an idea of what apparently works in Westboro and maybe how much it costs. And the rest of us, I'm sure, will feel free to look at other towns and without having to invent our own way. There's other ways out there that apparently are working. Is everybody else all set?
We have one hand raised in the attendees list.
Okay.
It's Mr. Litt. And then Andrew has his hand raised as well.
Go ahead, Tim.
I just think it's important that we rationalize the list of scenic roads. I mean, when a road was accepted by the town seems like a pretty crazy way to determine how we treat it. Either, we need to add all 68 new ones, or we need to come up with some set of criteria that tell us when we think a road is scenic and when we think a road is not. Because right now it doesn't make any sense to me.
There is a criteria, Tim.
Well, currently, as I understand it, we have the 78 town meeting that said everything up until then, and everything after that isn't.
No, but there's a list. I think there's four items or four listed reasons to want the road to, or say that the road is eligible to be a scenic road. I don't have those in front of me, but
I mean, my point is I guess that, we need to rationalize the list and have a list that's consistent with, whatever reasons we come up with. At least from the discussion I've heard and from what I've read, it doesn't seem like we're there. That's my 2 cents. I would support the notion that it ought to be an arborist. I had a horticulturalist in the family, and the differences between someone who's trained and someone who's not is quite noticeable. Thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else? Karina?
There's nobody in, we have Lisa Braccio has her hand up, and then Debbie DeMoria is in the attendees list, in the public attendees list. And Andrew Dennington has his hand up as well.
Well, let's since we've heard from both, let's hear from who was the other person?
Debbie DeMoria.
Oh, Debbie. Yeah, let's hear from her.
Hi, this is Debbie DeMuria, 58 Flag Road. I just wanted to provide a little clarity around what I know on the scenic road. My understanding is that there was the different warrant articles at the 75 and 76 town meeting, they were put into place, and more and more people wanted their roads and the trees to be protected. And that's how the 1978 came about, is that, it was sort of kind of getting too much with coming up with more and more small lists. They just decided at that point, Conservation Commission decided just to make them all scenic roadways. I've gone through all annual town meetings just to set the record straight, and there's no account of any other vote that undoes that. So the record stands. And also, just to mention, in the 2008 master plan, which a consultant had prepared for the town, there's a statement that all roads all non-numbered roads in town are scenic roads. So at least in 2008, we knew that was a fact. What's happened in the last 10 years, I think, is there's been a disregard for the laws around scenic roads. And it's maybe been forgotten by the town, the departments, the DPW, but our consultant who drafted the master plan in 2008 was aware, and that statement was well known in 2008. So I don't think that anything crazy has happened over the years, except for that our DPW has been disregarding the law. Thank you.
About back to Andrew. Thank you, Debbie. Back to Andrew.
Thanks. So I don't need to unnecessarily prolong the discussion, but I think it's a natural question which comes up on the idea of a moratorium, that if there's a kind of emerging consensus that we're all going to work together to try our best to have a solution at a fall town meeting that makes sense, balances all the different concerns. I mean, I think that a moratorium, the concern I have is just about, let's say that in March, there was a couple years ago, there was a year in March where you get couple of warm days, the buds on the trees start to swell, and then you get heavy snow, tons of trees come down. So an example of where you get some type of a unusual event that really results in a lot of people want to cut trees, right? And they're on scenic roads. So they're not even necessarily, a emergency or a threat to safety, but my feeling would be you would want to defer to if a homeowner feels that it's unsightly or it is dangerous. I would have a lot of respect for their own view of how they should use their own property. So how would you deal with that? The kind of the time sensitive or maybe emergency tree removal issue that would occur in the moratorium. And my thought would just be that if you simply enforce the existing Shade Tree Act, then all the hearing requests come to the planning board sorts out, the different requests, and that's the way to move forward. That's the issue that would really need to be addressed with a moratorium that just had no exceptions. And again, that we could get into a whole long discussion about that, but that issue is going to come up.
You've pretty much described that gray area between a tree that is clearly a danger and a tree that may be one, and that's where we've heard the complaints the most, which is somebody determined that the tree was an imminent danger and it gets cut down with no hearing, no notice, nothing, just gets cut down. So you've pretty much described a situation that needs to be addressed, as you said. Go ahead, Lisa.
Thanks, Don. So my comments were along the same line as Andrew's. If we did even considered a moratorium, there has to be exceptions. Obviously, for the utilities, the summertime is their trimming season. And obviously, I think the processes are in place, and we all know now that utilities have to come before planning board for hearings. So I would be looking to consider an exception for the utilities based on them following the bylaws as we have them today. And also, Andrew, I was on the same page with an emergency. If something does happen and we need to do it in an emergency fashion. So I think we should consider some form of exceptions, and even for an emergency, a hearing can still happen. That's fine. But I just don't want to put a moratorium that nothing can come down when something may arise that needs to be addressed. So that was all. Just wanted to share my concern on that. Thank you.
Anyone else?
Yes, Town Council Talaman has his hand raised.
I don't want to be a naysayer here, but I'm wary about legally about a moratorium. I certainly think the processes should be followed. I think the town is going to have to hire either through an interim, through a procurement process or otherwise, a tree warden to do the job of a tree warden. But a moratorium is not such an easy item to put out there when people have a right to apply for certain things under a statute. Moratoria do exist in certain other contexts, zoning, building permit kind of moratoriums, sewer moratoriums exist too, but those are for the purpose of further study to discuss an immediate kind of change or problem, not a failure to implement statutes in the manner that that they exist. I'm a little concerned when we talk about moratoria, that folks with the rights to apply to take down a tree their rights could be adversely affected. So, and they could challenge that. So all moratoria are subject to a certain amount of due process and oversight. They generally come in through a bylaw adoption on their own, although sewer moratoria don't need to do that. So I think there's certainly a good discussion about ensuring that the processes are followed or that additional processes be developed, but I'm not sure a moratoria is your solution.
Go ahead, Marnie.
Thanks for the comments and opinion. So I guess the whole point is we wouldn't be here if people enforced the law. So as much as I appreciate, Andrew, the suggestion that it should be enforced, we have maybe it's a disciplinarian effect of a DPW that isn't following the law. So is that the first step? But I think we have to actually, before we close out this meeting, we have to make a decision as a joint group here to say, what are our next steps? Will there be disciplinary action against the DPW for not actually following up with the law? What is the disciplinary action? That's something for you to figure out. But I do think that, what we're trying to do is enforce a process that exists. And so something's gone awry. With that, if we can we, on the interim, find a tree warden and hire them through some sort of procurement, as Councilman Tellerman has said, and use that tree warden as the person in the interim until we can actually get the bylaw written. And so agree that we'll hire a consultant to be able to support that and act in that duty of a tree warden and follow the current process until we can actually get a full tree bylaw in and get everything done for the fall town meeting. But I do think we need to make a decision. I would hate to close this meeting, have everyone leave and have something still up in the air. That's my 2 cents.
I'd support that. That's my 3 cents. So for what it's worth.
But I think you're on the right track, Marnie. The next question, as far as the an interim tree warden, would be the qualifications, which I would hope would be a certified arborist. But also, who would that tree warden answer to? whether it's long-term or interim. Answering to the DPW may just put us back where we were, or it may solve it temporarily or permanently. But we need to know, if we hire a tree warden, who does that person answer to? And the
Don, if
tree-
I may,
Yeah, go ahead, Lisa.
sorry. I think the way the bylaw is set up is the tree warden answers to the Board of Selectmen. Jay, I'm sorry, Town Council, is that correct? The way that it's currently set up? Am I reading it wrong?
You can call me Jay. Ultimately the source of ultimate authority is the select board already. The fact that the day-to-day supervision of the tree warden's activities might necessarily involve the DPW, because they're the ones that are often charged with doing tree work, is it's just kind of a circumstance. But the select board's the appointing authority already. So ultimately the select board control discipline, hiring, dismissal, procurement, retention, all of those things over the tree warden now. So the fact that for practical reasons that role existed within a DPW framework doesn't change that.
So I guess that answers the question short term until we decide on a path and a process.
Yeah, I'll add too that, the statute, chapter 41, section 106, is the statute that says when you go over 10,000 people, you're supposed to have someone with suitable training. Doesn't say what that suitable training is. There's a somewhat accepted set of guidelines by the Tree Wardens Association that suggests, not requires, suggests at least an associate degree or similar degree in forestry or arborists, or as an arborist, and then additional qualifications if applicable. So that's why outsourcing it can be valuable, unless someone wants to take that on in a more limited way, or get the training from the position that they already have. It's not always that easy, and I certainly represent a lot of towns over 10,000 people who have tree wardens that don't have such a degree, but they might have equivalent experience, and those towns also use arborists on contracts. And I think there was some mention previous of a fund to help assist with that. So there is some backstop there too, but might be worthwhile at least thinking as a select board as to what you're looking for in your next tree warden, or the process to utilize tree warden services.
Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I guess this is just from a timing standpoint. I mean, I agree with Jay that the idea of a moratorium raises more problems than it solves. And Lisa, correct me if I'm wrong, but you said your plan before tonight was to have this on our March 15 agenda. I mean, that's what, 3 weeks away? I'm not sure we can do, 2 weeks away. I'm not sure we can do much better than that in terms of timing. I'm not ready to make a decision. I mean, I agree that whether it's from a consulting standpoint, we're not going to hire somebody full time between now and March 15th. It seems like the interim solution is going to be, hopefully a contractor that's a reasonable cost and can be covered either through the current budget or a reserve transfer. But I'm more comfortable addressing that on March 15th. This doesn't feel, I've disagreed with an awful lot of what's been said tonight and agreed with an awful lot about what's been said, but I think our board, we should thrash through it on the 15th and see what the best route forward is for, a contractual, arrangement, hopefully with a tree warden.
Marty, I'll just add to that. Now, after this discussion tonight too, I think it will be helpful for us to make a few calls even and try to get some idea of, what we may be looking at for costs. I know, we've got the budget in front of us as well. So as we look forward, I think these are some serious questions that we need to discuss on the 15th. And Don, if I may add one final thing, I'm actually going to leave. Chelsea's going to take over the rest of the meeting. I have a capital meeting that I have to attend. So Chelsea's going to chair the balance of the meeting for the Board of Selectmen.
Thanks a lot, Lisa. Good to see you. So if we're done with the, from what I heard, between now and the 15th, I know the planning board members will keep doing some homework on this, but I think Lisa just said that someone on the Board of Selectmen or staff, Mark, might be looking into the whole picture, which would be, of course, the cost and the administration. So if I have that right, then we'll look forward to seeing you guys on the 15th. Yeah, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I've just got a very quick ask, and maybe this is directed to you, Mimi. I'm interested in taking a look at some of these statutes. I'd prefer not to reinvent the wheel. Do you have them in PDF or otherwise? You can send them along. Other places that you've looked at for models.
I don't have them in PDF, but I can send links to you.
Okay, that's fine. Great, thank you.
Can you please send them to me too?
Sure. I'll send them to the whole board so no one feels left out.
Okay, so we'll look forward to the 15th. I'm sure there'll be discussions between the town planner and the town administrator as to whether or not it's appropriate for the planning board to join your meeting. See how much progress we make between now and then. I want to thank you all for that discussion. The next item within this joint meeting is the MBTA communities. So Karina, we'll start with you, I guess, and you can set the table for the discussion. I guess you're going to start off with something that initiated this, which was the state, right?
Yeah. So last year, maybe a year and a half ago, the Housing Choice Bill passed, which made some changes and initiatives to increase housing. I'm not sure if density is the right word, but housing opportunity around train station, commuter rail stations, public transportation. And it became known as the MBTA communities multifamily housing process. And what it is the state working with the DHCD now after the law passed or the changes passed are have guidelines for the communities for criteria that they have to meet. As you know, Southborough is a commuter rail community with the train station down on Southville Road. And that being said, in order to maintain ability to receive certain types of funding like Mass Works, possibly the one-stop growth grants that are available that the EDC is working on, trying to procure for Route 9, et cetera, on some other grants, you would have to create this zoning district within a half a mile of the train station, 50 acres in size, and I believe half of that would need to be within a half a mile. So as you're aware, the train station is surrounded by, first of all, it's on the town line, surrounded by protected resources, wetlands, river. It's pretty much built out. So all these things lend itself to difficulty in being able to create an overlay district, including no sewer infrastructure, that would allow for a density with the minimum threshold of 750 units that would be able to be built or allowed to be built by right in this new zone. So I know that town council had put out an advisory letter several months ago describing this MBTA communities. There have been a ton of really good workshops and informational presentations. One in particular was the Mass Municipal Law Association provided a PowerPoint presentation, which we've included in the public packet on the planning website. If you go look where the agenda is, you'll see that PowerPoint. And it goes from, talking about how this MBTA communities came about to defining which communities are what category, the thresholds and the criteria that the communities have to achieve by a certain time frame. And again, the town doesn't have to do this, but if they want to have the benefit of particular grants, then they would need to proceed with getting this district adopted at a town meeting. That's pretty much it in a nutshell. The PowerPoint presentation that is in the public packet on the planning board website next to the agenda, if you haven't looked at it yet, it's a really great resource. It explains everything, so I highly recommend that anybody who hasn't to go through those pages. So that's about it. The question is, how does Southborough approach this initiative? Does the town want to, actively try and meet that standard, or on the other end of the spectrum, not want to deal with it and just go along the way they've been going on? There are some who think that, having density by right in certain parts of town may impact the characteristics of the town, the rural community, et cetera. And then there are people who believe that, higher density housing is something that's needed. There is not a specified affordable housing component within this. It's more purely a density requirement. So just to give you a perspective, the town of Southborough, the 2020 census, there are approximately 3,700 housing units. 750 units, which is the minimum required to be allowed by right when you create this district, represents 20% of the housing stock. The MML gave a great kind of description of, say, another town like Plimpton, the 700, and the 750 units in this zone, again, is the minimum threshold that was determined by the state and the DHCD. But in Plimpton, it represents 70% of their housing stock. So taking it down this path, because several communities are preparing letters with their concerns about the specific one-size-fits-all criteria of this initiative, which to them doesn't make sense, because for some places it works and for others it's totally out of proportion. So the MMLA, during the workshop, they put out a sample letter that the town of Medway is providing and working on a draft to provide the DHCD with comments on this initiative. The MMLA, the Mass Municipal Law Association, is also culminating a letter and has reached out and said if other communities want to participate, they can send their concerns to them as well, and they would include them in their letter to the state with their concerns about this initiative. That being said, at the end of this PowerPoint presentation that I've included in the public packet, there's a timeline of events that need to happen that, well, they don't need to happen, but if you're going to participate, and one of the first thresholds is that if you want interim compliance, that there's an online form that needs to be completed, as well as some other criteria by May 2nd, I believe. And again, it's details something to effect that this has to be discussed by the Board of Selectmen. This form has to be filled out, and then the state will give you interim compliance until, 2024, 2023, 2024. But the bigger question is, SHOPC, and they're here tonight in the joint meeting, particularly for this topic. SHOPC has been talking about this housing choice bill and effects as they've been looking at 21 Highland Street, South Union School, and the feasibility of making that into affordable housing. And because of its location, just on the border, or maybe just within the half a mile of the train station, they thought maybe, that would be a good starting point. And this was before the specific criteria came out. They had already been talking about that location for affordable housing. So as you recall, that 21 Highland Street CPC, Capital Planning SHOPC subcommittee was created to do research and to determine options for that building. And again, that's an aside. But that's kind of that initiative in a nutshell. So SHOPC's been looking at it and discussing it. It certainly needs some kind of a approach. Who's going to spearhead this and make sure that the tasks that have to be done take place? So that's where we're at. We're trying to brainstorm on the best way to approach this requirement or this initiative.
Karina, one other thing, the letter from the conservation agent.
Yes. So
did you send that out to everyone? Did she send that out to everyone?
I sent it out to the planning board. I thought I sent it out to SHOPC as well. Do you recall seeing an email that had Melissa Danza's comments and a map from me? If not, I can send it out quickly.
Make sure that Mark gets it too.
Okay.
So let's move. Did you want to go next, Dorian?
No, I mean, Karina summed it up. We have some serious concerns about the criteria that the state's mandating for the town of Southborough. We have infrastructure concerns. The density would change the character of the town. The board has some serious concerns. We understand that this isn't, black and white right now. They don't have all the bugs worked out of it. But we feel very strongly that we need to respond as a town to the state to let them know what our concerns are and how this is the ramifications to this town would be. Not, in my opinion, not seen in a good light. But I just think we need to send a letter from the planning board, the select board. I got that right this time. SHOPC, maybe EDC, anyone, the zoning board. I think we need to respond to the state and voice our concerns very strongly. We don't have the infrastructure. We don't have the land. I don't know how we would come up with 50 acres in the town of Southborough to designate to this. And 15 units an acre, it would change the character of the town. So if we have to have 25 acres around the MBTA, a ton of that everything's developed, but a ton of that is wetlands, which they say doesn't count. So we really don't have 25 acres around that half a mile radius. South Union School is actually 6/10 of a mile. So it's not even within that area. And then they want another 25 acres and they can be in 5-acre increments all over the town of Southborough. Imagine high density, 5 acres scattered all around the town for 25 acres. And you could do high rises. They say you could do high rises. I mean, they don't consider any of these smaller rural communities. It's almost like they want us to build into a city. So I have some of my board members here. They can speak to, what they're thinking. We have Tom with us. He is the chair of the subcommittee. So I would really like to have him talk to you maybe about the South Union and what they've, what they're looking at and what they're thinking, but we're concerned.
Well, the purpose of the agenda item, correct me if I'm wrong, is to uh, precipitate some type of action. Somebody's gonna do something about this between now and May 2nd. And if the South Union discussion about that will lead us there, that's fine, but otherwise, I think the focus is on who's gonna do what, if anything.
I think we need to start with the letter to the state. And I'm happy to start writing it and then hand it off to someone else to change it and alter it. But we definitely need to do some type of a response to let them know the ramifications to the town of Southborough and how this is going to impact us. I mean, there's no funding for any of this stuff, the infrastructure that would be needed. There's no state funding. They don't speak about any of that. There's a lot of cost involved in this. There's no answers in this law. So, I mean, there's a lot of things that are missing.
So if you're willing to do the first draft, Karina, is that consistent with the Medway letter?
What do you mean by consistent?
Well, the purpose of the Medway letter is what? Is it for Medway to say that they can't do it?
It's kind of outlining the various issues and concerns they have and impacts and how they feel. Like I said, it's not a one size fits all. So yes, it's an explanation of the problems that they're encountering as they think about moving forward with this initiative and how it is problematic for the town to make it happen.
Chime in with a couple of quick big picture thoughts on this, if I could.
Yes.
I think I want to just kind of change the sort of paradigm of thinking about this a little bit. I think there's a benefit to each of these towns implementing one of these MBTA zoning districts because there are benefits that flow from having a district. So you qualify, those benefits are the municipality then qualifies for these state funding grants. If you don't have an MBTA community district, then you don't qualify. So I think the big picture issue is that Southborough and these other towns want to have a district. And I think what people are complaining about or struggling with these current DHCD guidelines is that the criteria to get qualified for MBTA community is difficult. It's difficult to meet all these criteria in order to get the zoning district that you want. And just as a quick aside, this is a zoning overlay district. So even though it's designed to allow for multifamily development at this density, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to happen. It may never happen, but it's the creation of a zoning district that allows for this. And so I think what the real issue is whether the criteria are too stringent for getting the zoning district approved by the DHCD. I think everyone would like to have it, and everyone would like the criteria to be less so that we can get the district without having to jump through 20 hoops. I think that's just my 2 cents on trying to sort of reframe what I think we're trying to accomplish with this MBTA community issue.
And I believe if you look at that, and Mimi has her hand up, Dawn, but if you look at that PowerPoint presentation, I keep referring back to, there are criteria that involve, if I'm correct, what can be included in this area. So, one thing is to say 25 acres within a half a mile, but it has to be a certain type of land. In other words, there's certain things you can't count, like, protected resource areas, which really limits the area around the train station. And that, I think, is what complicates this. because, how far do you extend? And yes, you can do pockets of 5 acres or more in other locations, but you also have to show that it's somehow connected, that, in some kind of accessible way to get to the train station.
Go ahead, Mimi.
And I did
Thank
forward
you.
everyone that email just now for the conservation agents comments. If you didn't get it, let me know. I'll forward it to you. I didn't send it to Jay. I'll send it to him.
So comments have to be into the state by March 31st. And I think that, and I'd be happy to help you write a letter, Dorian. Southborough has, many disadvantages here. First of all, is that our train station is on the town line, and when figuring out the 50 acres, the explanation was that they did a circle, a half-mile radius around the train station, and that's 500 acres. And so the 50 acres would only be 10% of that. However, we only have 250 acres in Southborough that we're in control of. And Hopkinton, as an adjacent community, is also obligated to have 50 acres, 750 units of housing. So I would think, since it's on the line, that the two towns should share the obligation instead of doubling the obligation. Towns that have, several stops in their towns, they don't have to have a 50 acre zone on each stop. They get to split it up. So I would think that we would be able to share it, first of all. Second of all, as mentioned, there's no affordability in the legislation at all. And the idea is to create more housing because housing is so expensive in Massachusetts. However, the area by our train station is many historic homes built in the 1800s, homes built in the 50s and 60s. And so by Southborough standards, those are affordable, not deed restricted, but they're among the least expensive homes in town. And we're going to encourage redeveloping that area and building more expensive multifamily units over them. It doesn't make any sense. Yeah, and as mentioned, only half, so 25 acres needs to be down there, but you have to prove in the plan that you can build those 750 units. And I don't think you can with that it's already developed in small lots. So that's the first thing that the town, if we want to comment to the state, it has to be there by March 31st. The other question is, what funds do we get from MassWorks and one-stop grants? Do the benefits of those funds outweigh the drawbacks of what this zone would do to the town? Those are my comments.
I can clarify that I believe MAPC put out a chart of the communities in our region, maybe 7 or 8 in a list in an email, and I posted that on the Dropbox, showing what grants have been obtained by those communities. And the 2 grants that they did have in that list was the MassWorks, and there was a housing grant thing. Southborough had not received grants in those 2 categories, correct? And I can forward that to anyone who would like to see that.
Anyone else? Yes, go ahead, Marty.
Yeah, I guess while conceptually, I don't disagree with a lot of what's been said. The purpose of this legislation, it's not by accident. And I just think that towns like Southborough have to tread carefully. And that our reaction to the legislation and the regs can't simply be no, or we're different, or it's going to ruin our town. This legislation was passed with a specific intent. And I just think that Southborough, as well as a lot of other towns, have to realize that potentially, if we're just going to, plant a stake in the ground and say, no, this will ruin the way we perceive ourselves, we're going to get pummeled. We're going to get pummeled by state regulations, state agencies, lack of grants. I just think we need to be a lot more creative in figuring out how to address what this state legislation it's passed. And one of our state senators is one of the biggest proponents of this sort of an approach. We don't have a state rep right now. We will, once the fall rolls around, but we're swimming against the tide here that the state wants more density around commuter rail and other transportation hubs. That's not going to change. And so rather than, as I said, plant a stake in the ground, I think we got to point our energies more to figuring out how we address what the state is trying to accomplish, rather than simply being naysayers.
Sam, you got your hand up?
Yeah, thanks. To follow on Marty's point, I attended a Mass Municipal Association workshop early this month, and there was a presentation by some folks from DHCD about this. And I was struck by how unsympathetic they were to efforts to somehow get around this. And the message was extraordinarily clear. I thought that the law is the law and you folks have to figure out how to deal with it, which in some ways is disappointing, but I think Marty makes a good point that it's clear what the state was intending to do with this. So again, I don't think we can count on much relief from the state or writing letters to people in state government. Not that it's not worth expressing our views, but again, I think there are a lot of complexities to the regulations, and maybe we can creatively find some ways to mitigate some of the impacts that folks are concerned about. But I don't think there's going to be a lot of relief coming from the state on this, in spite of probably what will be a substantial amount of concern expressed by various towns. So I think that's where we ought to focus efforts primarily, in addition to maybe writing a letter if we feel that we can communicate an effective message there.
I just want to point out that, that when you determine the zoning district and the unit capacity within that district, there's discussion about the estimate must take into account for each parcel certain types of criteria. And that includes, restrictions and limitations that are already in place in the ordinances, local wetland protection, tree preservation, stormwater, Title V, wastewater disposal, all those things you have to take into account to make sure that it's doable when somebody proposes to build a project within this zoning district. Not that it has to be built, but when you create the area, you have to take those limitations into consideration as well. And when Southborough doesn't have public sewer, and there's a lot of wetlands in that area, I'm just saying, you can't forget those things because it expands the area of the zone, because those, if it's my understanding, those parts you can't count. It has to actually be something that someone could build there if they propose to.
Dawn, can I just ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead, Chelsea.
So Karina, I just took a quick look at the information that Melissa had sent over. And looking at the map, is there a way to actually calculate the acreage related to the wetlands and flood zone open space in that map, and kind of take what Mimi was talking about with the kind of the half circle versus the full circle around the station, and then figure out what really the acreage is that Southborough has around that either has a house on it or is an open parcel to be built on.
Yeah, it can be done. It's a little bit lengthy. I know that as part of SHOPC meetings that Sarah Hecker, who's been assisting on this topic, developed some draft boundaries in discussions with SHOPC,
Okay.
showing the limits of that proposed area. The GIS mapping we have does have features where you can draw boundaries and determine areas, that in conjunction with assessors mapping. But yeah, I think there's a capability to do that. Just
Okay, that might be
takes a-
helpful to know. Just, you know, fact base, like
Yeah.
this is what the max amount of land is in that area, just so that we know what that is.
Yeah, and let me just point out, it's not a small task, and in fact, that MAPC has said that, you know, they're accepting applications for district local technical assistance on those particular types of tasks, like build out analysis, boundaries for your proposed district and all that. So there's another consideration if it's an extensive effort to do something like that. But I'll talk to Sarah and see what she feels is a level of effort of maybe coming up with one scenario or two or something like that for an idea. But she did do some draft maps already.
Okay, it may be helpful for us to just show what we could do rather than what we can't do and take that approach.
Okay.
Anyone else want to speak to this?
Tom has his hand up.
Oh, okay, Tom.
Just a really quick point to follow up on Chelsea's point there. I think if you do go through the exercise, I don't think you should exclude land where there's already a house on that. I think any land that does have a house should be included within the developable area of the zoning district that we would be exploring. That doesn't mean that the houses there need to be blown up and replaced immediately with multifamily housing. It's just a matter of that's not part of in the DHCD criteria. It excludes wetlands and other developability limitations. But I don't. But properties with houses and buildings already on them do not, or should be included within the district that's developable. Just a clarification on that.
Yeah, and I want to point out that it may not be a minor task to do that. Build out analysis and that kind of information, requires kind of minutia looking at what is existing there around the property and, giving and taking where you can expand the boundaries. And also what I can do is we'll check out what that requires to come up with some kind of a sample beyond what Sarah has already provided. And then, we'll take it from there, see what we can do. Because sometimes the thought process is, we can just spin up a map and get a boundary out there, but it's not always that simple. The capability is there, but the level of effort may be more extensive than what it warrants, especially if it's decided that if the town moves forward with this, do you hire a consultant to help get you through the process, a specialist, or apply for a grant from MAPC in order for them to assist as well. I know that other communities are doing those kinds of things.
And that really is what Medway is complaining about in their letter, is that DHCD is requiring these municipalities to show that all these lands within the district are actually developable. And it requires doing this extensive analysis of what's developable, what the wetlands are. I mean, to do a wetland study, it costs a lot of money to have an expert come in and figure out the wetlands. If you need to exclude Title V areas, it costs a lot of money. It's just a huge undertaking. What Medway is saying is DHCD is being too stringent with what they're requiring municipalities to demonstrate to them in order to get approval for these districts and having to do all these things. I think that's maybe the subject of if somebody's going to do a letter, that we may want to echo Medway's concerns that what DHC is requiring us to show is too stringent.
Go ahead, Mimi.
Just to clarify that half the district has to be within a half mile of the train station. The rest of it can be anywhere else. So there may be some land on Route 9 that we could do a mixed use district in that would comply. So we don't just have to look, but it would take a lot of the pressure off if we only had to do 25 acres instead of 50.
Go ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, Colleen, it looks like in the attendees, there's Alexander Frisch. Looks like he's a ShopC member. Can you move them over? They got their hands raised. I just want to point that out.
Go ahead, Alexander.
Alex, you're on mute.
Yeah, thanks. Sorry about that. I became unplugged, so I had to come back in. Let me get my back.
Don, while we're waiting for Alex, can I ask a question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
Mimi, do we know how far the Hopkinton State Park is from that half-mile radius on the Hopkinton side of the tracks?
I don't know.
Because I think that the Hopkinton State Forest is going to fall within that 25-acre area, which is going to be an issue for.
That's Hopkinton's problem.
I know, but if we're trying to share with them.
Well, they already are obligated to 50 acres and 750 units as an adjacent community.
Right. Well, I know Sarah did come up with the maps, and we had marked out, okay, what if we did the district in this area or this area? So we have that stuff. I'll ask Sarah when she's feeling a little bit better to send those to everybody here tonight. So you can see where we've already mapped that stuff out, but that was an interesting concept with sharing it with Hopkinton. That would be nice if they let us do it, but okay, here's Alex.
Yeah, those maps are up on the Dropbox of the planning board Dropbox, but we can forward them.
Go ahead, Alex.
No, I'm all set. Thanks.
Anyone else?
So Don, I think I just wanted to say one thing that we wanted to get out of this meeting was a direction of like kind of jurisdiction and input. Like who, with the Board of Selectmen here and ShopC here and planning here, the goal was to determine, I think one of the goals was to determine, moving forward, ultimately, who takes the lead.
Should we ask town council? Who we would recommend to take the lead? Or unless somebody else wants to volunteer to take the lead. Go ahead, Jay.
I don't have a great answer for that. Obviously, a lot of this planning, because it's zoning bylaws, is going to come generated out of the planning board, but it's really a group effort. And, you know, I echo what everyone else is saying about frustrations. I represent a whole bunch of mid-sized communities in and around 495, and very few of them could possibly meet in any kind of legible way the 50-acre, 750 unit minimum. I have very little. You know, I am preaching patience. I think you have to go through the exercise, and you got to meet the timelines. I don't think what the state is saying they're going to require is going to resemble what ultimately they do require. It may get worse, it may get better, but I think that there's going to be some amount of reckoning based upon the critique that they receive regarding some communities' abilities to meet this. And if they're unyielding, then I see a whole bunch of communities opting out. I've already represent a number of communities who say that they're just not going to go through the exercise because it's impossible. So it's going to be difficult for sure. It's going to take select board, planning board, conservation, outside consultants, all of that, if this is ultimately what the state wants.
Dorian, you volunteered to do a first draft,
I did.
and Mimi, you said that you would be glad to help out. Is there anyone on the Board of Selectmen that would want to take a stab at that first draft also? And then the three boards would come up with something and distribute it in a certain amount of time.
We can volunteer somebody who's not here, right?
I was gonna say, if nobody else wants to do it, I'll do it. But I'm happy if anybody else wants to do it.
Or
so
volunteer someone who's not here.
Sold.
Andrew, did you want to do it?
Yeah, I'm interested in this topic, but it sounds like someone else is taking the lead to preparing the first draft, and you're really looking for someone that's to help provide input on behalf of the select board. Is that right? Or,
Yes.
okay. So I couldn't tell whether we have people from the select board competing to do this or competing to not do this, but
I'm not competing to do it if you're interested in doing it.
okay.
To be very clear.
So I will raise my hand to help out.
Okay. Great, thank you.
So
I
if
mean,
there's
I will
nothing,
say, I come at this from the standpoint of we should make an effort to comply with this law. I think that this is a very well-intentioned law. I broadly support what the state law is trying to do. So after listening to discussion, I don't think we're going to get much sympathy if we our initial standpoint is, nope, this doesn't work for us. We'd rather not. We'd rather turn down all the money, particularly given all sorts of other things that are going on. So that's but I think that I've been listening to concerns. A lot of them are very practical, particularly in, the location of where our train station is, where I'm on board with trying to convince the state to show us some flexibility.
so if there's nothing else, we'll leave it to Chelsea, Andrew, and Mimi. And do you have an idea of when that draft would be distributed to the rest of us? Or what's the deadline for this to be submitted? The end of March?
March 31st. And it's Dorian, Andrew, and Mimi.
What did I say?
Chelsea.
Chelsea, but that's okay. Hey, Chelsea, you can get it.
Sorry.
I'll start tomorrow. I'll start writing it tomorrow. And then I'll call and say, hey, Mimi, here are my thoughts. Hey, Andrew, what do you think of this? Between the three of us, I'm sure we can get it going.
Okay, and then depending on its, once it gets distributed, including with town council, then keeping in mind the horsepower behind whoever signs the letter, whether it's one board or all three, we'll move forward with whose letter it's going to be representing the town. There's
So
nothing
Mark-
else.
Wait, I have a question. So Mark, should that letter, once we've come up with a relatively final draft of that, get that to you to get to Attorney Tallerman?
Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. Want to follow process.
And makes sense. So
Sometimes.
if there's nothing else, we'll move on to the St. Mark's Street relocation / zoning map update.
Don, should we end our meetings for the individual boards?
Well, you're welcome to stay, but this is a joint meeting and I'm not sure if the selectmen want to leave because this has something to do with them. But you're welcome to stay or you're welcome to.
I have no problem staying, but if my members want to leave, I wanted to adjourn our meetings. They're welcome to stay, but I don't think you need our input at anything else, correct?
I believe that's correct.
Okay, this would be a roll call vote. I'm going to adjourn the meeting of Shopsy at 8:48 p.m. Roll call vote. John?
Aye.
Alex? Alex, you're muted.
Aye.
Marty?
Oh, forgot about that. Yes, aye.
Jesse?
Aye, but I'm staying on as a planning board member.
I know, but Tom
Aye.
and Dorian, aye. Okay, thanks, gentlemen. Stay. I'm staying, but I wanted to end our meeting. Thank you, Don.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank all of you guys. So let's start this item off with the town planner. Can you set the table for this one, Karina?
Sure. As you may all be aware, St. Mark's Street is in the works of being relocated at the intersection of Marlborough Road. With some history there, but it was brought to my attention that when you relocate a road, that it should come before the planning board. So I sent a legal opinion request to Jay Tallerman, asking him for some feedback on jurisdiction based on Mass General Law, Chapter 41, Section 81. One of the things is that the question was, does the town have an official map? So the planning department poked around a little bit, and first impression was that the zoning map would be that official map. But in getting feedback from Jay Tallerman, I believe that that is not necessarily considered the official map, that there would be some official roadway map. And I don't think that anyone has found that the town adopted any such map. So whether there is a map or not, I guess the determination, well, based on Jay's feedback, the determination is that it should come before the planning board in order to review it, and not in a public hearing per se, but to review it and then report to zoning board, then report back to the select board on any concerns or issues or vetting it. So I did receive an email from Mark Purple, who also responded saying that it would be, next step would be for the DPW to submit plans to planning board to review. So if that is the case, we could get that on a future agenda so the planning board could review the plans and provide their feedback.
all of that would be after the fact that the trees have been cut down, stone walls have been moved, and some drainage structures and have been installed, and some structural soil has been placed. I agree that those plans should be submitted so that the planning board can comply with the law by either submitting a report to the select board or doing nothing for 45 days after we receive that information. The matter of the town, of the official map of the roads, to me is a separate issue that, unless advised otherwise, I think the town should pursue how to do that and who would do it. Would the Board of Selectmen, it would obviously, I think, at least based on the resources that I know the town has, but it could be wrong, that we don't have the in-house capability of generating a map and complete the requirements. Is the official map defined anywhere where it would say it has to have all of the streets, or it can contain the different zones in the town, or it can contain all of the water bodies, and so on. So it seems to me, I know in 2006 we had the zoning map. That's the last version that we have, and I don't recall that coming out of the planning board's budget, but we'd have to go back and look. It's something that we as a town should pursue and update the map to a 2022 version that would show the new roads that have been added to the town since 2006, along with a realignment of at least one road, which is Washington Street, on just the south side of Route 9 and 495. So that's a separate action, I think, that we should pursue and get, and the goal would be to have an updated official town map for that complies with General Law 41. Is it 81? I'm not sure which 81 it is.
81E, I think. 81E is about the map.
Okay. So to me, that's a separate issue from the St. Mark's action that we should also look into. And I guess, Jay, if I can, if you have experience with updating or creating and the level of detail of a town, official town map, if you could share that with us, then maybe that might help us determine the level of effort that we need to get to that point.
It's actually not particularly common for a community of your size to have an official roadmap under 81E. We don't run into it very often. More frequently, we go through the more generic process under 81I, where if there's going to be a layout or a relocation, a formal one that involves Chapter 82, Section 22 through 24, that there's going to be a referral to the planning board to chime in if they so desire. You know, with most roadways becoming public as a result of the subdivision process that happens in the normal course anyway, when it does occur outside the normal course, then sometimes planning boards get involved. Sometimes the 45 days lapse. So here, regarding St. Mark's, I think that there's a couple issues here. When you talk about relocation of St. Mark's, there's relocation small r and relocation big R. The big R being a formal relocation that would go through the layout and town meeting acceptance, and the small R being a physical relocation that doesn't actually yet, and it could at some point, involve town meeting action to change the layout. In which case the planning board's jurisdiction would get invoked and the select board would have an obligation to send it over to the planning board for comment. In the meantime, if the town does relocate it physically, but doesn't want to use a portion of it anymore, the current layout, then there's a separate process the select board goes through to abandon, not discontinue, not relocate, but abandon a portion of it as being unsuitable for use. That doesn't require planning board input, although planning board could certainly comment if they so desired. That's under chapter 82, section 32A, slightly different process altogether. Here, I haven't been informed as to whether or not the select board is going to go through the process in this next town meeting of making the new location of St. Mark's a public way. Likely could happen at some point, given that the current layout is in a public way. If and when it does occur, as part of that process, the select board would be referring it to the planning board, and the planning board would have the 45 days to hold a hearing, hold a meeting, issue a report. Would be the normal course. That's what most towns follow. So there's still a few steps out there in front of us. But those would be the triggers for all of that.
Okay, going back to the relocation of Washington Street, that was part of a site plan that the planning board worked with EMC and Dell and the town of Westboro. That was only a few years ago. And I think because it went through the site plan process and therefore the planning board, that it complied. It had that element of planning board approval for the relocation. And then I do recall, it's got to be maybe 20, 25 years ago, there were some sections of abandoned roads where we went through that process, the selectmen went through the process to not just discontinue, but abandon. So we have examples of how that's been done in Southborough, but it sounds like there's other than the DPW just submitting the plans for the St. Mark's layout, before they do that, I think what you said was it has to be decided by the selectmen as to the status of that relocation. If it's going to become a public way, if it's going to go before the town meeting. Could you go over that again as to what the steps are? We don't want to have a submittal from the DPW come to the planning board and have it either be incomplete or inconsistent with, or out of sequence from what's supposed to happen.
Right. So the process under section 81I is meant to dovetail with the processes for acceptance and layout of roadways in general, which is a select board then town meeting process. And because the planning board is charged with a certain amount of oversight over the creation of public ways, generally through the subdivision process, but not always, the chapter 41, section 81I carved out a role. And that role gets triggered when the select board put forth a roadway to be made a public way, or for the relocation of a public way or a discontinuance, in which case the planning board's jurisdiction is required. The select board could participate in a process that comes short of that, however, by just working through whatever means are possible by creating a way that might be publicly owned, or there'd be a public ownership interest in it, but isn't necessarily a public way in the formal sense under the statute. That, in that instance, the planning board's obligations and rights and authority under Section 81I wouldn't be triggered. So the fact that the select board is taking a significant role, obviously, in the reconfiguration of St. Mark's doesn't mean that automatically the planning board has a role at this stage. I mean, it stands to reason that in the process of dotting all the I's and crossing all the T's, that when all is said and done, this thing is going to be put before the town meeting for a new public way location for a variety of reasons, including Chapter 90 benefits. But until that process is invoked, then the planning board's role in a formal sense is not yet triggered. That doesn't mean the planning board can't chime in and give the selectmen their thoughts on the orientation of the new location. It just means that the events that trigger the planning board's rights under Section 81I have not occurred yet. So nothing more, nothing less. It's just part of a process. I'm sure the select board have a lot on their plate when it comes to fixing this roadway over there, and I just don't think it's hit the radar screen yet to have it be put forward for public way status, either through the layout or the town meeting article for acceptance of the new layout. So when that process starts, the planning board has a role. Until that process starts, the role is as much as the planning board wants to have, but it's more informal in that sense. You can give your recommendations now if you like, but and that could suffice later on if and when it becomes a actual Section 81I proceeding. But until that point, it hasn't quite matured, so to speak.
How do you ensure, when you have a subdivision road, it's reviewed and vetted, that profile cross-section, that it meets the town standard or with waiver, whatever. So if a roadway relocation moves forward and it gets, at what point is it vetted that it meet in the future it's going to become public? Where along that line in this process would that design be vetted?
Well, I don't think the town has certain standards that they're going to apply, best management practices, good engineering practices, et cetera. If they're going to make a roadway available to the public, I think that's just a general duty and oversight of the select board and the DPW to do that. The planning board doesn't, it certainly has jurisdiction over new subdivision roadways, but it's not like they touch every single possible roadway and its alignment and reconstruction in the town. I think their experience is super helpful in all of those processes, but that doesn't mean that it automatically touches every single bit of construction of a travelable way. Here, I think a fair bit of thought. I'm no engineer, but I've seen the plans for St. Mark's and they seem pretty highly developed, and someone put a lot of thought into grading, drainage, alignment, everything else. In fact, I think the whole point was alignment and safety. So I don't think that it's gone without oversight and notice. I just think it hasn't developed through that process that is embedded in the subdivision process. My guess is there's plenty of overlap in the kind of things that you look at and the kind of things that the select board's consultants and engineers looked at.
So does my last question, so does section 81I, or in retrospect, if we had an official map, section 81G, is the role in the fact that if a roadway gets moved, that the plan gets updated in order to have record of the plan of the roadway location? So in this case, we don't have an official map, but it's still to come before the planning board for what purpose?
A recommendation, just a recommendation. And the roadway will be reflected in a number of recorded instruments, as well as with the town clerk in terms of what's going on, but it doesn't mean that it necessarily goes on a map. It might find its way to the zoning map at some point, and it's certainly going to be a matter of public record in the registry. But the fact that you don't have a roadway map, which most towns your size don't, doesn't mean that there's not a traceable record of it.
And if we had an official map, which you're saying is not typical for this size community town, then it would trigger it to be updated.
Yeah,
It would
and
require
that's
that map to be updated.
That's a constant process. I don't know if it's annual or just as roadways get changed, but it's an obligation on the part of the town, and certainly an unfunded obligation on the part of the town to have that done on a constant basis when new roads come up. And the original adoption of it has to be by town meeting as well, I'll point out, but I think that's already known, and that to our knowledge has never happened. So no one has been able to indicate that anyway.
Okay, and just to be clear, you're saying at this point, it's not required to come before planning because it's not determined that it's going to be a public way at this point.
I don't know what's been determined or not determined. It's just the process to make it a public way has not ripened yet. My guess is that it's likely it will become a public way. It's all part of the things that are before this. I don't want to speak for the select board, but I'm assuming that they're focused on getting the way done, and then when it's done, they'll probably put it up there for public, but it may never happen if people are satisfied with its role as kind of a publicly accessible but not public way, again, capital P, capital W. So I imagine it will, but it's just not on the radar screen that I'm aware of right now. I haven't seen the warrant yet, so I don't know what Mark and the select board are thinking, but if they put it up for public way this year, then you're going to get your 45 days as a planning board.
It's like a roadway acceptance, right? It's like a road acceptance.
It's the same
process.
thing. That's the same thing. There'd be the layout process and then the acceptance process at town meeting, along with the conveyance of whatever easements or taking of necessary interest in real estate to get that done.
Okay, because it's my understanding at that point that the as-built of that relocated road is reviewed as part of the planning board's jurisdiction, but I digress. That, but we can.
Yeah, I don't know about,
Okay.
I'd hesitate to use the word as built, but obviously a way is going to be in enough of a final form that is well surveyed so that the select board can refer to a plan, which will then get recorded in the registry that shows the new layout if it comes to pass.
Thanks.
So the sequence of all of this is it your opinion that the sequence is proper? That the trees came down, the excavation, the drainage work was partially done before any of this was discussed or determined?
I haven't seen anything that I would label as improper. I think that some folks might have wanted it to occur in a different sequence, but no one's indicated to me any facts that the select board in considering and acting upon a public project did anything wrong or didn't consider all of these things. Might other people have wanted to chime in on it? I suppose, and I'm not sure that anything was stopping anyone from doing that per se, but it's just, I haven't seen any indication or facts whatsoever that indicate that anyone acted wrong or in bad faith. It seems like a pretty well-engineered project that a lot of people put through a lot of iterations of plan development. So, but again, Don, someone else may have other facts that indicate to the contrary. But a lot of these municipal laws have built-in redundancies, and sometimes the redundancies are really helpful, and sometimes they don't quite overlap. So it is just one board going it alone a little more. But I guess in the same token, the select board might sometimes think that, geez, why aren't we more involved in roadway creation through the subdivision process? I think it's good to have multiple sets of eyes on things, but some of these statutes are set up so that it's one party's responsibility or the other.
Okay. All right.
Just for the
Thank you.
record, we send those plans to all departments, like it or not.
Let me open it up to the members of the planning board, and then I'll turn it over to you, Chelsea, for your board. Mr. Mills, questions, comments?
Thanks for the explanation, Town Council. Appreciate it. I guess I don't really have anything new since the process is being followed, and we'd be teed up when, like you said, the fruit ripens to the point it would come to us. I think that's kind of what you were saying. It seems like maybe the process should be a little different, and we should look at it differently, maybe afterwards, to how the trees could, be reviewed ahead of time. And I think that was part of the conversation earlier as well. But there's definitely seems to be a way that this could have gone better for the future. So that's all I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Stein.
Well, I agree with Mr. Mills. I hope that we take a lesson here, and that the process is refined, so that we don't find ourselves in this land of uncertainty again. Thank you.
Mrs. Latrell.
Thank you. Just so I understand, 81I says a town which has not adopted an official map, no public way shall be laid out, altered, relocated, or discontinued unless the proposed layout, alteration, relocation, or discontinuance has been referred to the planning board. But you're saying that that doesn't need to be done until it's going before town meeting? Because wouldn't it
Not
already
necessarily
be-
before town meeting, but before the layout and acceptance process actually occurs. Until then, it's a public project. Again, that the town could have chosen to advance it in a parallel track, but I think 81I is intended to be annexed, so to speak, to the Chapter 82 processes for layout and acceptance or alterations or relocations of public ways. Here, the public way, which exists on paper, it's an act of paper, not the physical elements of it, hasn't been altered yet. That the town may be constructing something that connects to it does not mean necessarily that they've taken those steps. They also, again, as I mentioned, they can discontinue the portion that I guess will be no longer, but they can also abandon it, which is something less than that, and hold it open for potential use in the future. So that is still out there before them. I've made a recommendation to them that they are under somewhat of an obligation if the existing layout ceases to become a used public way to go through that abandonment process under Section 32A of Chapter 82A. But the layout itself right now will continue to exist, and that when they go to make a new layout, I think that's when you'll have a chance to comment on that.
Okay, thank you.
Mrs. Houlihan?
So thanks for the clarification. One of my concerns is, I know we're talking about St. Mark's, is in the packet of DPW, they have multiple streets that they're looking to do work on. And I think if anything is a reoccurring theme here, it's we've got a DPW issue following processes, particularly around trees. And my worry is that there are other streets that are scenic streets that are on this DPW plan to kind of relocate or do different things on. One is flagged Deerfoot Road, and there's 3 major trees there. So at least before those things happen, as the process is what you've said, Jay, then they have the right to do that, except on scenic roads where we just discussed about, we're not going to implement a moratorium, but we need to make sure that some of these things don't move down that violate current processes. So it's my only statement.
I think you're quite right. Certainly if there's a tree issue out there, then at the very least, the tree warden, such that they are, should be involved in that. If it's a scenic road, then obviously the planning board as well. My understanding on flag, and I don't have all the details, is that the reorientation or the proposed reorientation is happening within the right of way itself. As we know, when roadways are accepted, it's the roadway generally exceeds the pavement width. If it does go outside of that, the accepted right of way, obviously we're in the same situation that we are right now in St. Mark's, where at some point, if they want to make that official, then certainly the planning board's going to have to get involved.
Thank you. That's all done.
Go ahead, Chelsea.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for all your comments. Colleen, if you don't mind bringing Lisa back over, she's rejoined us. And Marty, do you want to start?
Oops, yeah, thanks. Jay, thanks for that explanation. I was looking at I'm usually pretty good about statutes, and I was looking at the wrong provisions. But I appreciate the explanation, and I expect that the process when the board determines that it needs to go to the planning board, it'll go there. So other than that, I don't know what the timetable is for the spring. Karen is not here. But I think construction is supposed to gear up again. I don't know if it's in 45 days or so. So that might be part of our consideration about what we do and how we time things out. But we can touch base with Karen about that.
Thank you. Sam?
Thanks. Thanks, Jay, for the explanation. Very helpful. I don't have any further questions, but I do agree with Ms. Houlihan's comment that we all need to be very vigilant now about work that's going to happen over this next construction season as we sort some of these things out to make sure that we don't get off track and wind up with a, oops, we should have done this differently kind of event again. So we should watch that and let's move forward. Thanks.
Thank you. Andrew?
I don't have anything to add which hasn't already been said. Thanks.
And Lisa, I'm not sure how much of that you heard, but do you have any further comments?
I don't. I came in kind of a quarter of the way through, so I guess I'll agree with the comments that have been said.
Okay, thank you. And I'll just say thank you for all your feedback, and thank you, Jay, for outlining the process. And I think we'll see this come up again as we continue down this road. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone from the public? Any hands up? Anybody? Questions, comments? I think Jay really is very helpful with clearing this up. and the path forward.
Clear as mud, right?
Always. But appreciate it. If there's
course.
nothing else, then the
I am
joint,
going to move to adjourn the selectmen's meeting, or the board, the select board's meeting.
I'll second that.
Okay, roll call vote. Marty,
Aye.
Sam,
Aye.
Andrew,
Aye.
Lisa,
Aye.
and Chelsea's aye. Have a good night. Thank you.
okay,
Good night,
thanks very
folks.
much. We'll see you next
So
time.
Don, you guys are hanging around for to consider 4 or 5 more other things after this? on the
These
agenda?
our agenda shows 2 more public hearings, but both of them, they're not even going to show up. They're not ready again. And so those should go quickly, and then we'll go into the discussion item, which is the tree bylaw, proposed draft warrant article, and then the scenic road proposed warrant article. It's I got 9:22, and I hope to tell Kate that we will be done by 10 o'clock. But thanks for thinking of us, Andrew.
But Andrew, the planning board gets paid by the hour, so they like these long meetings. So it's very helpful.
I think we don't get paid at all, Sam, unlike the select board.
Thank you, Select Board. This was very helpful.
Yes, thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting us.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
glad you came.
Agreed.
Thank you. Okay, next item on the agenda is a continued public hearing. This is 325. Oh, I'm sorry. The discussion item is the master plan committee update. Mrs. Luttrell.
The Master Plan Committee is meeting on March 9th, and we're doing the final review of the draft chapters. After that, we will have the final formatting done and put it into a final draft plan. Hopefully ready for to announce at town meeting.
Great. The word final is excellent. Any questions or comments? Anyone from the public? Once again, Mimi, keep it moving, and we're almost there. It's great work. Next item on the agenda is a continued public hearing, 325 Turnpike Road. Ken's Foods expansion, major site plan approval, and public hearing, 325 Turnpike Road, Ken's Foods expansion, special permit for lower impact development. These public hearings are continued from September 27th, October 18th, November 15th, December 13th, January 10th, January 24th, and February 7th. We'll turn it over to the town planner for a quick update so that we can entertain a motion to continue.
The applicants had a submission number 3, which is currently being reviewed by Fuss and O'Neill, and we're awaiting a follow-up review letter. While we're waiting on that, the applicant team requested to be continued, that the major site plan and the lid public hearings be continued to the March 14th, 2022 planning board meeting. They don't need an extension request because they're covered through that meeting date.
So all we have to do is entertain a motion to continue these public hearings to March 14th at 7:05 p.m. Is that correct?
Correct.
Mr. Mills? You there, Andrew?
Hey, sorry about that. My earbuds died on me. So you're ready for my motion? Is that right?
Yes, we are.
I make a motion, we continue the public hearings for 325 Turnpike Road, Ken's Food expansion major site plan approval to March 14th, 2022 at 7:05 p.m.
Second.
Your motion was just for the major site plan approval. You're going to do another motion for the lid?
Correct.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Lehan, yes.
Mr. Mills?
I make a motion, we continue the public hearing for 325 Turnpike Road, Ken's Food Expansion Special Permit for LID to continue to March 14th, 2022 at 7:05 PM as requested by the applicant.
Second,
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell,
Houlihan, yes.
Okay, thanks. Those have been continued. Next item on the agenda is the continued public hearings for 200 Turnpike Road, snow removal / landscaping contractor facility, major site plan approval. And same address, 200 Turnpike Road, public hearing, 200 Turnpike Road, snow removal, landscaping contractor facility, special permit for lower impact development. These public hearings are continued from November 15th, January 10th, January 24th, and February 7th. We'll ask the town planner to quickly give us an update on where we are with these.
Same with this project, the applicant Jonathan Crandall has asked for the major site plan approval and lid public hearings to be continued to the March 14th, 2022 planning board meeting. And they will not be attending this evening. They have a previous request extending the approval period to April 15th, 2022. So they don't need an extension until a couple hearings from now.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Mills.
So I make a motion, we continue the public hearing for 200 Turnpike Road, snow removal, landscaping contractor facility, major site plan approval, and also 200 Turnpike Roads, snow removal, landscaping contractor facility, special permit for LID to March 14th, 2022 at 7:10 PM as requested by the applicant.
Second,
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes.
Thank you. Those have been continued. Next item on the agenda is a discussion item, tree bylaw, proposed warrant article. Ask the town planner to set the table for this discussion.
Okay, Mimi has provided a draft tree bylaw dated January 24th, 2022, which has been distributed to the planning board members for review. In that document, you'll see tracking changes on who submitted comments. In talking with Mimi in preparing for this meeting, there's a few policy issues that need to be ironed out before this gets provided to town council for review. And the second part of this is since town council Jay Talman said that confirmed that these are general bylaws and won't require public hearing per se, the planning board has to determine if they want to proceed with just discussion items on the agenda and carrying this through to town meeting, or if you want a formal public hearing process for which we would have to let the newspapers know by March 9th in order to have a meeting for March 28th, if that's added to the planning board schedule. So Mimi has some policy issues that she wants to discuss with the planning board members, and then we need to determine, moving forward, do you want a public hearing or you want to just carry these as a discussion item for the public to give input?
Thank you. Go ahead, Mimi.
So my questions were, I think take a breath here. My original bylaw pretty much just codified what was in Mass General Law, either scenic bylaws or the Chapter 87. And then I received some input back that added some additional things that I think the board needs to discuss and decide whether or not they want to adopt those. The first thing is, what role the planning board is going to play. Should the tree warden report to the planning board? Should the planning board act as kind of a check in balance to the DPW and the tree warden? Does the planning board want jurisdiction on all roads, not just scenic roads? And that would be all non-numbered roads. Have all public shade trees come under the jurisdiction of the board. And do we want the bylaw to just address public shade trees, or there was a tree clearing paragraph added if we want to add that? I think those are my questions.
Do you have any recommendations, Mimi? Leave it like it is, or are you leaning in a certain direction with some of these? For example, we're talking about a tree warden, but the discussion 2 hours ago was, I think it was leaning toward a tree warden, at least a temporary one. So are we going to get pushback on a proposed code bylaw that the direction for the tree management for the town hasn't been agreed upon?
Oh, you mean we don't have a tree warden or anything to fulfill that position? It sounds like
It's not what we have right now, it's the way going forward. So if it's decided that we're going to have a tree warden, that's one thing. If it's decided that we're not going to have a tree warden, then the language of what's being proposed isn't consistent with that.
I think we need to have a tree warden.
That seemed to be the way that the whole discussion went tonight earlier, that, you know, everybody was talking about a tree warden. Then who would that person answer to and be guided by? Well, I guess what I'm in general saying is us deciding on these policies at this time premature? Or do we launch with this first and then have the town decide, have the rest of us, the selectmen, DPW, planning, decide in what manner we will comply with this code? Anyone? Yeah, go ahead, Marnie.
Yeah, so I guess I'm of the mindset that if we don't put something in writing in front of people, then it's just going to continue to be what we're facing. We already have something in writing. I would preference or have preference for a tree warden who's an arborist, who actually is, you know, has the ability to say whether a tree is going to survive or not, based on their knowledge of like trees. I think the reality is that if that goes that way, the budget thing is an issue, because I don't think you can hire an arborist and not pay them anything, or pay them a $1,500 stipend for, you know, 70 roads to manage and the trees that are on those. So I feel like we should at least put something down on paper. I would say we should have a tree warden. I think it should be a paid position. I'm a little unsatisfied with the current situation, and I wasn't sure if the DPW was telling the tree warden or the tree warden was telling the DPW. And I think because there was that lack of clarity on who made the decisions, that there has to be some level of checks and balances in our system. I think it's too much for the planning board. We already have quite a lot on our plates to manage. You know, for Karina to manage an employee beyond her own team and all of the stuff that has to happen, I don't think it's realistic that the planning board has that oversight. But I think there should be some kind of process or accountability where there's a checks and balances, where this person would be part of the DPW, and then the DPW, I don't know, part of me feels like if you hire the right person and you get the right specifications and you have a role and responsibility and what your job is clearly depicted in a job description, that they would have the obligation to kind of go do the right thing. And if this process is in place that's established in writing through a bylaw, they're going to do the right thing. That's at least my hope and prayer. And so that's what I would say, let's put something in writing and put it forward for a town meeting. I do think we should, Mimi, just to address some of the other things that you raised, I do think we should have a tree clearing thing in there. I've, reiterated multiple times my own issue where they clear cut 4 acres of trees on a hill on Clifford. And that just became like a wet, muddy dam for, months, ruining houses at the end of the street. So I think because there was no tree clearing requirement or anything that stopped that was a challenge. I drive by Main Street and that A&R and all the trees that just got cleared on that. It's just devastating. So I'd rather have something into a writing. I think for our, maybe one step at a time, Mimi, like let's do the shade tree and see how that gets done, for whether the town agrees with the way that we would like to propose it in the bylaw. And then if that we have success with it, or we revisit it, and then we can maybe think about other, is it broader than just public shade trees? But maybe we just do one step at a time. So those are I think I addressed a lot of your questions. But I'd rather put it in writing and have the town make it, have a debate over it and be aware of it.
Go
ahead, Andrew.
Yeah, I agree with Marnie. I think the town needs to see that we're being proactive on this. And Mimi's done such great work too. I think it should get some visibility. And we should put it out there and say, look, yeah, we know that this is still open because there isn't a tree warden currently, but this is, what the direction we were headed, and let the town decide on it. I mean, there's, some people have used town meeting as a way to, put it out there. People start talking about it, maybe pull it back and say, maybe, all right, maybe next year we're going to actually go forward with it. Not really suggesting that's what we do, but I think it's important that the town sees that all the questions about trees being removed and who's doing them, that we're not just sitting back and doing nothing about it. So I'd be in favor of putting it forward and having a public hearing on it. Thank
A
you.
public hearing, even though it's not required.
Yeah, I think so. I think we should, and put it out there so people know. And it's not a surprise to the selectmen either, that we're going to move forward with it.
So you're saying not hold off until the fall? Which is what Selectman Dennington was trying to push for.
I mean, I guess we could play nice in the sandbox, but is there already a placeholder on the warrant for it?
Mhm.
But if we don't have the public hearing, we can't talk to it on the warrant, right?
We don't need a public hearing.
We don't need a
Yeah.
public hearing.
Okay, well, okay, then let's not have the public hearing. And then maybe talk to it at town meeting and teed up saying, okay, this is a FYI, we're gonna really put the full court press in the fall, and we only do like a 5-minute talk or something. But I think, I don't think, I'm with Marnie that we shouldn't just sit back. We should have something out there for people to see.
Jesse?
I am in favor of the bylaw in its draft form. There's a lot of good stuff in here. It does represent a substantial change in that, if I'm reading this correctly, maybe the tree warden would be reporting to the planning department, not the Board of Selectmen. Is that correct?
I think that was one of the
Okay.
changes
that's a
made. That
pretty-
was one of the policy questions I wanted to ask this board.
Yep. So that's a big thing to do. And I do see the merits of reorganizing in that fashion. And, it's almost of the mindset that things can only get better, or we have nothing to lose. So why not give that a try? That presents like some logistical changes. I personally think we would be best served by having public hearings on this in advance of town meeting. I can't remember us. Maybe somebody can refresh my memory. I can't remember us doing anything at town meeting without having public hearings on it and really airing it out and
Well, we
going
did-
over it.
We did have the original chapter 153 trees that we did a couple of years ago when we were implementing the Tree City USA. So we had it on the agenda as a discussion item and carried it through, but there wasn't a public hearing. It wasn't.
But I feel like this is more substantial in terms of changes.
Oh, yeah.
So if there's an issue with doing it like we would do for a zoning change, I just feel like that process lends us to a better chance of success, which in my mind would be the passage of this. So I'll go along with the consensus of the board on the path forward, but that's my opinion, that we're going to have a better result. In my experience, if we follow the similar protocols we would do for a zoning change. Thank you.
So I think that Marnie's first comments have pretty much captured the way forward. We got to do something. We should do something. We have something in writing. I agree. I was kind of on the bubble about the public hearing, but all the comments are that pretty much everything that we've done, especially something of this level of significance, can't go wrong with the public hearing. People are going to say, well, I didn't hear anything about this. Some people might say that. So they probably will anyways, but having a public hearing is I think is the way to go. And it kind of maximizes our effort to get the word out and have people understand it. What we can also do, and if there's any meetings where the public hearing isn't ready yet, we'll still have it as an agenda item. As far as the tree warden answering to the planning board, I think we have seen some examples of that, but I think the majority of that arrangement is that tree warden answers to the Board of Selectmen, Select Board. And I think that might be a much cleaner path for a couple reasons. One is because the planning board is probably about the same as the select board as far as knowledge of trees and that type of stuff. But we're not in the loop or in the chain of funding for the DPW. So if the tree warden, some things that the tree warden may recommend, which would be, let's say, I mean, we're focused on cutting trees down, but let's say planting trees. And the tree warden says there's 25 locations in town where trees should be planted. And this is what it's going to cost. It's going to cost $25,000. So, and the tree warden comes to the planning board and says, that's what we got to do. And the planning board says, okay, that's what we're going to do. But we don't have any control over the budget to plant trees. So I think it would be cleaner, you can always change it, would be to have the tree warden answer to the selectmen and just hope that it'll work. And like, I think, as Marnie said, you know, if you have a clear job description where part of the tree warden's job is to keep the planning board informed and have the planning board participate in the annual program and as to what to do and where to do it. Tree warden says we want to plant 100 trees, and there's pushback. Tree warden says we're only going to plant 2 trees this year. Planning board could say, well, we have developers who have donated trees, and they've never been used. They're out there and they're willing to plant them, but we need approved locations. So I just think tree wardens should, because of the money and the responsibility and just the whole arrangement with the DPW under the Board of Selectmen, that the tree warden would answer to the select board. Public hearing. Did you need anything else? Is everyone else cool with that, or want to make adjustments?
Fine. Does the planning board want jurisdiction over all roads? So it would be consolidated hearings for any tree removals.
Well, there's going to be very few roads. If the scenic road gets passed, there would only be a handful of private roads, really, that wouldn't fall under the scenic. And if they fall under the scenic, then that automatically includes the planning board. That's, I think, why one of the main reasons that we initiated the scenic road bylaw this year is to capture those 68 roads that have been approved, public ways, and are not in the same category as all the others.
My instinct is to just say the scenic roads. And that was kind of my earlier comment, like, let's just stick with scenic roads and see how this works. And then if we can expand, or if it is wildly successful and, you know, people on private ways or whatever want that, maybe that's something we can work with the town over time.
Okay, I agree. We have to stay with the public ways because that's what the scenic road state language addresses: non-numbered highways and public ways. I think once we get into private ways, we're going to get in trouble. Town doesn't plow them. Town doesn't maintain them. We start getting into the trees on those roads, we're going to get in trouble. And there's not that many. It's not that many. As a matter of fact, if you look at some of the ones that we have, the private ways, that have more trees than, better maintained than most of the town roads.
They still have trees on them. It's remarkable.
Yeah.
I'll stop.
Do you, are you all set, Mimi?
Yeah. So go with, stick pretty much with just codifying the mass general laws and tying up like definitions and what's an emergency and those types of things. And then we can move on to other things at a later date.
Which I think, again, what Marnie brought up would be a real key element of this whole program would be a very clear job description for the tree warden.
So
Mimi, I'll
Mimi,
help you.
yeah. So when we have a draft, when you're gonna modify the draft to change the jurisdiction and all that, does the planning board want to review this one more time at another planning board meeting? Or do you want planning department to move on a public hearing and wait for your draft, provide that to town council for review? And then what meeting date do you want that public hearing to open? That was really a confusing long question.
Is that a question to me?
It's to the planning board. I need to know three things. First to Mimi, you'll be modifying the draft.
Yes.
And then if you send it to me and the planning board members, if there's any lingering comments, then we can get those back to you. Then the second step is, when do you want this to be open for a public hearing? There was discussion about having an additional meeting, and I just want to get that firmed up if we want to already act on that, or do you want to wait till after we talk about the scenic road bylaw?
Mimi's going to make the adjustments based on what we talked about tonight. At the same time that Karina will draft the public hearing notice. And the public hearing notice doesn't have the language of the draft warrant article. It tells the public where they can go look at it. And if by the time that's put in the paper, we should have the latest version on a link that the public can go look at. So I would suggest you can launch on that public hearing notice right away. Right, Karina? You got enough information.
Oh, yeah, we can draft the public hearing notice. The timing of when you want the public hearing to open is key.
I guess I'll leave that up to the board, but so you're saying we could actually have it on the 28th, the public hearing?
Yes, if we notify the newspaper on the 9th, then we can open a public hearing on the 28th. And I queried the planning board as to who'd be available, and Mimi and Dawn, you were, and Marnie's available. Jesse's not available. And I just didn't hear back from Andrew if you were available on the 28th.
Yeah, I can be there.
So
Well,
we
why
would
don't
have.
Why don't we plan on the 28th? The next, and then the second meeting after that would be, is it April?
It's March 4th, yeah, March 14th, March 28th, and then April 11th, and then April 25th. So we would have 3 meeting dates prior to the annual town meeting on May 5th. We would have March 28th, which would be added, April 11th, which is scheduled, and April 25th.
And I would suggest that the March 28th meeting, either just have that one item for public hearing for the trees. And if after we get through with the scenic road, if we want to take the same path with that those would be the only 2 items on the agenda. And that the current public hearings that have been continued would not go on the 28th.
Correct. Those motions were made to March 4th, were made to, oh, yeah, never mind. Yep, that's.
So on March 14th, and, and, I can be criticized for being, negative, but until I see otherwise, on March 14th, when both, parties are still not ready, then they would be continued to the, April, 11th.
11th.
If we're going to insert an additional meeting, then we don't want to overload the board and our staff. It would be a short, hopefully a shorter meeting that would, and simpler, that would not include continued public hearings for site plans that seem to never be ready. So is that the path forward for the trees?
Sounds good.
If there's no more questions or comments, we'll move on to the next item, which is the scenic road. And there were two drafts. Draft number one just said all the public roads since certain date in 1978, but didn't list those roads. And then draft number two said to make the following roads become scenic roads. And then it would have a one-page listing of the roads that would be included. And I think town council leaned toward listing the roads, and I kind of do too. Because if we just go with draft number one, it would automatically have people raise their hands and say, what roads are they, or is my road on there? So, and if they don't see their road, in draft number two, if they don't see their road, they'll say, well, what about my road? And there's so, between now and then, and the town meeting, or even in the public hearing, if that's the way we want to go, we would have a separate list of the roads that were approved in, what was it, 75, another list in 76, and then the ones that were included up to 78. And that's, I think, a manageable number of roads, or listing that could be shown, and keep this moving. So the people would know what they're voting on in 2022 and have knowledge of what roads are already scenic in the town.
I like that approach.
Anyone else like that approach?
Yeah, I concur. I think the second approach made a lot more sense for me, just looking at it. I'd also think that Tim raised the question of the scenic road definition. I think if we're going to prepare a list of already approved roads, we should also provide what the definition is of a scenic road and how we're complying with that in that handout for town meeting.
Oh, yeah. That'll be the next. We wanted to get this out to town council and also to the news, a link so the newspaper people and the public can start to look at it. But the next step for me would be to work on a presentation that would hopefully capture those, those open pieces of information that we know people are going to want to know.
Yep, full support.
Public hearing?
Sure.
Okay, so that's the way we'll go. We'll have a public hearing for the tree and a public hearing for the scenic, and we'll launch on that right away.
Quick question for the tree bylaw. Once I get the final draft from Mimi, you do want me to forward that to town council, right?
Yes.
Okay.
And we've already got the opinion from council on scenic roads.
Yes.
Yep.
And I just want to note that Tim Litt had his hand raised during the tree bylaw talk and we missed it. Just so you know, I don't want to ignore him if he raised his hand. Just let it be known.
Yeah, Tim, if you're still there, go ahead.
Well, I'm afraid I'm still here, even though you all want to go home. I had a couple of comments on the proposed tree bylaw. First is under prohibited activities. You prohibit hanging a public message on a tree. But the past, and I think desirable practice, has been to put a notice of removal hearing on trees. So I don't think you want to exclude that going forward, because people who see the tree are likely to be the people who are interested in the hearing. Also, with respect to, you have at least one permit fee and then you have fines in this. I have a problem putting them in a bylaw because with inflation, they just shrink to nothing. So I would suggest adding a section that says something like, you know, the fines and fees shall be reviewed annually by the planning board in a public hearing and, you know, may be increased or adjusted as necessary. Something to make sure that you don't have to go back to town meeting every few years to get, you know, fees and fines increased. And then on the scenic trees thing, I think somewhere we need to figure out how to make sure that, you know, we don't get 44 years behind again. I mean, reading, you know, what you're proposing to take, you know, all the roads that have been put into existence in the last 44 years and make them scenic roads. But I mean, should this list of scenic roads be reviewed annually and added to, or, I mean, what process do we have to make sure that, you know, we don't end up, you know, in 5 years, you know, where we are today after 44?
Tim, that's a great question. And I wonder if we can make it when the town accepts a road, we make it a scenic road at that point.
I wondered about that, and I'm not sure whether town council would let you do that. If they would, that would be great. Another approach would be to just have a procedure that says, you know, when an article proposing acceptance of a road is done, the checklist along with, you know, does it have the right asphalt depth and, you know, width and markings and, you know, all that stuff, you know, is it on the list to be added, you know, as a scenic road in the same article?
Right.
Or a third approach would be the one that says, you know, once a year on the planning board calendar is, you know, look at all the new roads and see if we should be putting an article in, you know, to add them to the list. Any of those three, I think, would work, but just kind of hoping that we won't be here again in a few years probably won't.
I'm guessing, Mr. Chairman, our authority would be pretty much we do our own article each year to say, accept new roads, right?
Well, the road acceptance is usually can be proposed by anyone, right? I mean, you do it as part of a subdivision or plan, but someone who builds outside of a subdivision can request that their private road be accepted by the town. I don't think that article has to come from you. I could be wrong. I'm not an attorney, but that is my understanding.
I think you're right, Tim, but to have 68 new roads in 44 years, and now you have to subtract out probably the last 5 or more years. Andrew, you probably remember more, but the planning board was meeting every week, almost every single week until midnight, dealing with subdivision construction and plans in the 80s and the 90s. The town population doubled in that time, and I think in the last 5 to 6 or 7 years, we've only approved probably less than 5 roads, and some of those are private. So it's far, far more manageable going forward than it was through the 80s and the 90s when the town was just, I mean, just name any neighborhood. They didn't exist in 1978. It was just all woods or farmland. And the planning board was so busy dealing with those that things like scenic roads and trees and stuff was could never be discussed or didn't have time to get to those things. Now that the town is almost fully developed and the trend seems to be toward private ways, it's much more manageable.
But I think it's going to sneak up on you. And I think also, I mean, remember the discussion about an MBTA overlay district. And then there'll be the question of, do we do another, extended business thing for Route 9? Or, I mean, it just seems to me that if you don't put something in place, even though it seems like everything's on the right track now, I think everyone thought they were on the right track in 78. And then there was the surprise that all the building happened. So, I mean, when I see a problem, I like to put a fix in for it.
No, you're right. It's just that it's unimaginable that it would be anywhere near as challenging as it was back there during those two.
I mean, even if it's only 10 or 15.
Yeah, no, I think we're in agreement.
Okay, I'll stop beating the dead horse then.
No.
Tim, can I answer Tim in response to hanging something on trees?
Sure.
That's part of Mass General Laws, Chapter 87. Only the tree warden can hang something on a tree.
I understand that, but in 6.6 of your proposed bylaw, the penultimate bullet says otherwise.
I think I put that bullet in. So you can delete that if that's.
But, well, that's part of Mass General Laws. You're not supposed to injure a tree, and stapling something to it does.
It says, or hanging any public message. I don't mean to be picky.
I'll look at that. Okay.
We all set?
Thanks, Tim.
I don't want to keep you any longer. Thanks.
Thank you.
Appreciate the input.
Anything more on this agenda item, Scenic Road? If not, we'll move on to the planners report.
All right, so it's settled. There'll be an added meeting on March 28th, 2022 for the two proposed general bylaws. So we'll get those ads posted and get that information going. Board of Selectmen is going to start discussing in-person meetings at the in their March meetings, or I should say the Select Board. So we'll be waiting to hear back what they want to do with that. The state did extend Zoom meetings until July 15th, just so that you know. Colleen is working on getting information on updating the zoning map. She'll be meeting with the assessor's consultant who works on the GIS maps. So we'll have more information on that at the next meeting. Everybody's aware that the downtown district was approved by the Attorney General. And that's all I have.
Okay, next item is any questions or comments on that? Next item is the minutes, approval of minutes, February 7th.
Make a motion, we approve the minutes from February 7th, 2022 as written.
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor. Morris, yes.
Mills, yes.
Stein, yes.
Latrell, yes.
Houlihan, yes. Nice job, Kate.
Very good. Anything else?
As always.
Before we entertain a motion to adjourn, I just want to say that earlier this month, I notified the planning board members and the town planner that I was not going to seek a 9th term on the planning board. I had actually made this decision 5 years ago in 2017. However, we had a brand new town planner at the time, and I chickened out. I felt that I still could serve for 5 years, so I did. But it's not appropriate for me to go beyond this current term and commit to 5 years. So in May, I will end my 41-year work with the best planning board in the state of Massachusetts. And I feel very comfortable. It's a very strong board, very dedicated, very professional, knowledgeable, detail-oriented. It's a good time to get somebody new and let me enjoy some Monday Night Football and things like that. So I just want to put that out there, and I have more to say about it. Hopefully, if anybody wants to listen over the next couple of months, but I will not be seeking a 9th term. Very grateful to the people who have elected me all these years, and especially those people that have served on the board all those years. So at this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Yeah, just before we do that, Don, if I think if there's anyone who is interested in being chair after you depart, it might behoove us to start transfer of knowledge, let's say, if anyone is interested. Yeah, Mimi. And I just wanted to put that out there. And it's been an honor to be on the board with you, Don, and be a part of your tenure when you've been on the board. And I've learned a lot from you. You're going to be greatly missed. Thankfully, you won't be too far away in case we need some of that deep knowledge you have of projects from long time ago. But I completely understand why you're stepping away. 41 years is a remarkable time to be on the board and serve the town. So it does not go unnoticed, your dedication and commitment to the town. Thank you.
I don't think that was on the agenda, Mr. Mills, but
I know,
we
but
let that go.
I had to say it. So
Thank you, Andrew. Pleasure.
all right, motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion to adjourn has been made and seconded. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor,
Yeah.
Morris, yes?
Mills, yes.
Don, this is a tough moment, and it has also been a tremendous honor for me serving with you. And thank you so much for your incredible service to the town. Stein, yes?
Yes, thank you very much, Don. It's going to be a huge void on the planning board. And I've learned a lot in my short time on the board and really appreciate all your knowledge. Thank you. Latrell, yes.
I hope to follow in the footsteps of the greatest, or one of the greatest planning board chairs, Charlie Gaffney, who made himself available for a number of years and still does. I still speak with him occasionally in helping out the board. And I hope to follow in that. Again, we all learn from each other, and I learned a lot from Charlie, and I'll be around. At least I hope I will be.
And there's an open tree ward position.
I echo everyone's sentiments. And in my shorter time on the planning board, I've learned a lot. And over my 18 years here in town, I've learned a lot from this board especially. And I think it's a very well-established, high credible, high integrity. And I think you lead a great team here. So we'll be departing with sadness when you do end up leaving in May. Houlihan, yes.
We're adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good night.
Good night.
Don't change your phone number. Sorry.